What the fuck is this?
What? What?
What the fuck is this? This is garbage.
It's beautiful.
I am Razio.
What's up, guys? Excuse me, Raziel here, and this is the video that I've been talking about that I was going to do. And I had been writing some scripts for this video, but I realized while doing it that it's just better, you know, for me to kind of go off the cuff with this one and just improvise and talk about it, because a lot of things started coming to my mind, like, you know what, I don't want to get off tangents. It's a lot easier just to talk about what I want to talk about. So strap in and let's go, boys and girls. So this video is about gearing in Final Fantasy XIV, gear in general, and how it has a major problem. Now, I made a video about this, I think, like 2 years ago, and all the things that, and all the reasons why back then I said gear were a problem in Final Fantasy XIV still remain. There's still a problem for the same reasons. However, I'm going to provide some solutions to these problems after I point the problems out. Now, the first thing you have to understand is in MMORPGs, especially all the way back, and just RPGs in general, all the way back into, you know, the games of the late 90s, the first MMO I played, Assurance Call, into Dark Age of Camelot, into World of Warcraft, you know, Vanguard, all these games, they all had, gearing is an important part, but they had a very set system of barrier of entry. Excuse me. Now, what is barrier of entry? Now, barrier of entry is something that prevented you from doing a certain piece of content. So, for example, the first barrier of entry is always your level. What's your character level? It's kind of been watered down at this point, but I'll get into that a bit later. So there was the level, then there was the gear, and then there was your skill. 3 barriers of entry to do difficult content. So, for example, in Assurance Call, some of the most dangerous areas in the game, such as the Dire Lands and the Northern Island and stuff like that, you had to be a certain level to be able to go there, but not because the game said you can't go here unless you're this level. Now, there were dungeons that had an actual level requirement where you couldn't even enter unless your level was a certain, you know, number. But here in this situation, it was, in that game, your level didn't determine end game. It determined how much experience points you had and how strong your skills were. So you wanted a certain level to have certain skills high enough to where you wouldn't be resisted anymore, right? So you have that. Then you had the gear. The gear served the main purpose of preventing you, if you had good enough gear for that zone, that you wouldn't get 1 or 2 or 3 shot by everything you walked into. But then finally, skill trumps everything, because just because you had the level and the gear didn't necessarily mean you were going to be successful. You still had to play very well to survive there. Now, MMORPGs and RPGs in general followed this formula for a very, very long time. And it's the same in Final Fantasy XIV, but there's a glaring flaw in the gear category. So now, what skills you have available, as you know from, you know, level sync when you do old content, your level isn't really a big deal. It doesn't matter what skills you have in Final Fantasy XIV on your actual character. You can still get through content. The level barrier is still there, though, as you can see here, there are level 80 and 90, 89, you know, dungeons or whatever that you can't even queue for or go in unless you're at least the minimum level. So that's still a barrier to entry. Then there's gear. So you look at like a dungeon down here, and it has an average item level, but it's not an actual requirement. However, if we go into high-end duties, there's the 570. So the average item level you need to go in. So I stand corrected. Average item level means how much you need to go in. Sorry, early in the morning, brain's not working 100%. So they're still requiring gear, right, to even queue or go into certain content. However, that's where the gear requirement stops. If you're item level 570 and you do the first Savage Raid, you're not going to get 1 or 2 or 3 shot, right? You're still going to be able to beat it. It's all about your skill at that point, learning and memorizing the fight. So it's just a item level in Final Fantasy XIV is just a checkbox. Now, something else that is a huge issue with the gear in Final Fantasy XIV, and this is the crux of everything, is that the gear is meaningless outside of just being a checkbox. What I mean by that is this is the only and first MMO that I've ever played that the gear that you have that you earn from the hardest content only helps you to do the current highest content a little bit faster. You say, well, Raz, doesn't it give you an advantage in the next raid tier? No, it doesn't, and I'll tell you why. Because the raid fights are designed around you being able to complete this at the minimum gear level, correct? Like, that's the bare minimum you need, and then your skill takes over. Now, when the next Savage tier comes out, even if you're fully Savage geared, you're not going to have the advantage you're going to have over another player is literally probably less than 2 to 3%, because they also immediately release the next set of crafted gear with the next Savage tier, and the next set of crafted gear, in a lot of cases, because it's pentameldable, is better than the old tier's Savage raid gear. Final Fantasy XIV has this terrible habit of trivializing their own content and their own gear right when it releases. Same thing with their 24-man raids, which I know are mostly due for story and for catch-up gear for alts, but something's got to give here. There's a huge issue because right now, literally, even the Savage and the normal mode raid gear look identical. The only difference is Savage mode raid gear can be dyed, so you can change its color. To me right now, there's just not enough incentive to do Savage for a lot of people, especially since the gear you get from it only enables you to do that content. You know, you don't need Savage gear to get Savage gear, but you get Savage gear so that you can get more Savage gear in that same tier faster. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Now, what can be done to resolve this? I think the crux of this part of the issue, there's two things we can do. First and foremost, I think we can keep crafted gear at the minimum, at the item level that it always releases at. That's fine that it's the same or really close to old Savage raid tier. What fucks it up is pentamelding, right? So I would say how I would fix Savage gear first and foremost, so it actually does give you an advantage. Because keep in mind, in games like World of Warcraft, you know, for people to say the argument, well, Raz is the same in World of Warcraft. Actually, it's not, because if you do normal gear, it helps you clear heroic faster. If you get heroic gear, it helps you clear mythic faster and better and able to actually do it. And if you have heroic or mythic gear for the next tier, it actually helps you so you can actually just skip normal altogether next raid tier. In addition, it gives you an advantage, or some raid gear can give you an advantage in PvP. And we know in Final Fantasy XIV, no one really PvPs that much, and gear has no place in PvP. It doesn't matter what gear you have on, everything is homogenized and made, you know, equal or balanced. So what I would do first off, there should never ever be a max level dungeon or a piece of content in the game, you know, like for example the dead ends, where your item level gets synced down. That completely makes it so it feels like you getting better gear is useless, in my opinion. No max level content should ever have item level sync. It just shouldn't, flat out, plain and simple. Not at all. Should not happen. It's stupid. I don't understand why Square does it. One of the biggest points of RPGs is that progression of feeling stronger as you get better things, and that kind of kills that right out of the gate. So I would remove that first. What I would then do is I would make crafted gear non-pentameldable and only Savage gear pentameldable. And now here's the big thing I would do. I would also... Final Fantasy XIV desperately needs difficult, challenging, small man content, 4-man content, Savage or extreme dungeons, if you will, and make the gear there also pentameldable, but maybe drop, you know, at item level 590, like in this expansion, like 10 item levels below Savage raid, but also make all the gear that drops dyeable, like it is in Savage. Maybe some special rewards like mounts and things like that that you want to go after, but also make that gear pentameldable. So that would give people, you know, an edge going into next tier that would make doing and sinking this time and effort into Savages and extremes and everything way more worth it. I mean, a perfect example of how quickly Square devalues their own gear is the Extreme Trial, right when the launch of Endwalker, right, gave you 580 weapons as opposed to the 570 weapon that was for sale for Tomestones. But then 2 weeks later, when Savage came out and the crafted gear came out, you get a 580 pentameldable weapon. So that weapon you got from an Extreme Trial was only good for 2 weeks. So they have this horrible problem of trivializing the rewards in their own game. And I feel like this would solve it. Having extreme or savage difficulty 4-man dungeons, removing item level sync from all max level content, and removing pentameld from crafted gear and putting it onto extreme and savage rewards instead, to give you more of an edge. And then they don't have to rebalance anything, right? Because people who still aren't interested in raiding can, people who have no interest in raiding can still go and, you know, with minimum item level, because that's what the fights are designed around. But the people that did the content can go in and feel they have an advantage right out of the gate. I think that's really, really important. Anyway, guys, I want to make this video short and sweet, just to get my point across that the gearing system in Final Fantasy XIV is an issue, still has been an issue. I mean, I know players play for different reasons. I need more motivation to put myself through things like extremes and trials, because simply just the accomplishment of memorizing a fight and beating a fight that's harder than normal isn't enough for me in a lot of cases. I like to, because to me that's no different than this, right? It's no different to me than coming up here and going to achievements. You know what I mean? Like this is no different. It gives me the same feeling almost. I mean, obviously being savage is a little better, but still it gives me a similar feeling to just an achievement. And I've never been an achievement hunter in games. I like to feel that power progress, and always feel like I'm improving my character over time, and it feels relevant. Anyway, guys, what are your thoughts and opinions down below about my changes? Do you have ones that might be better? Put them in the description down below. Don't forget, I'm always streaming at least twice a week, soon to be 3 times a week, on my Twitch channel, which is on the screen now. Guys, really, really appreciate the support. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Go fuck yourself. I don't give a shit. And everybody, have a wonderful day. And as always, my friends, keep it real.